Welcome to the New Jersey HiRailers. Today, Jeffrey Potischman and I will review the new Lionel Niagaras that came out this year. They were in the 2018 catalog. And Jeffrey, what do you think about these things?
This is something I've been looking forward to for a long time. Obviously, by now, if I've seen the videos that I've been starring in, I'm a big New York Central guy. I don't think I need to say it anymore, but I'm a big New York Central guy. I really like the steam engines of the New York Central. I have the Century Club 2 Niagara, which I essentially ran the wheels off of, not figuratively, but maybe figuratively and literally, who knows. But it was a great engine, and when I saw that Lionel released a updated version with the newest electronics, I was absolutely excited, and I had to get it. So here we are today, and here it is.
Well, you, like me, have Lionel Century Club 2 engines, and this is an outstanding engine itself. And we'll go over the details on all the cool, technologically advanced things that Lionel put in this Visionline engine. And I think, by all standards, at the end of this video, you're going to really like what you see. And if you don't have one, you're probably going to have to run out and go get one before they're all gone.
Or two.
Yeah. 2 would be nice. Yeah. So Jeffrey, I know you're a big New York Central guy.
Yeah.
We've always done a little bit of history before we go through the Lionel version of what we have. Why don't you just kind of walk us through how the how New York Central built these and why?
Well, Paul Kiefer is the name of the gentleman behind the Niagaras. He was the chief engineer of motive power for the New York Central Railroad. And by the 1940s, passenger traffic was increasing drastically due to the war, and the Roaring 20s, passenger traffic increased. The 30s, it died off, but the Depression was ending, and passenger traffic on the railroads was picking up again. The Hudsons were some of the older ones. The J1s were almost 20 years old, and they decided it was time for a new locomotive, something a little more powerful. And some of the other railroads out in the West were using the new 484s. So Kiefer decided instead of a 464, he wanted to go with a 484, called the Niagara instead of a Northern, because in the way the New York Central did things, Hudson after the Hudson River, Mohawk after the Mohawk River, Niagara, the Niagara Falls, all things along the New York Central's water level route. And the issue that they came into was the fact that this was being built during World War II. And the government kind of put restrictions onto what you can and cannot build, especially with the railroads. And they said you could build freight engines, you could build dual service engines, but you cannot build locomotives strictly for passenger service. So although the Niagara was technically a dual service locomotive, it primarily only hauled passenger trains and express trains. And it was a lot smaller and narrower than the Union Pacific's 844, for example, which was also built by Alco. This engine built by Alco around the same time. But the New York Central Railroad was constricted to tunnels along the water level route, along the Hudson River, between Croton, Harmon, and Albany. So it was a lot slimmer in profile. It doesn't have many extruding details because it does, as much as it's not a streamlined locomotive, it's very modern in that there's not a lot of things popping out. And one of the most interesting things, even though it had a very short lifespan, because it came around close to the transition era, they did a test with a pair of E7 diesels, and the Niagara outperformed the E7s.
So this was primarily used between New York and Chicago, correct?
That was the New York Central Railroad's main line of New York to Chicago.
26 hours, I think, was the target or something?
I think it was 16 to 18 hours, I believe.
I wasn't 100% sure. I know. You know what? I confused my freight. Freight's about 25 hours now, so that's cool. How many passenger cars did they usually tag behind it?
As many as they needed. It was a very powerful locomotive. Normal train would be 12, 13 cars, but it could easily do more.
So there's unique things about the tender when New York Central built these, and I know it's featured in what Lionel did, but why don't you talk about what they did to modify the tender so that they could make it to New York to Chicago on one stop?
Well, these are the largest tenders the New York Central Railroad had, and it was designed to hold a lot of coal and not so much water. If I take a peek in a second, on the back of the tender, it says 46 tons of coal and 18,000 gallons of water, which is nice, but when we get into the detail, you'll see everything's on the back like the real engine. But anyway, the point was, they wanted to do as little coal and water stops as possible. So it had a giant coal bunker, and what the New York Central Railroad did was they had these track pans between the tracks on some of its long straightaways. And what would happen is the firemen would lower the scoop, and the locomotive would pick up water at 60, 70 miles an hour on the fly. So therefore, the train could make it to New York to Chicago with only one stop for coal. It didn't need to always stop for water because along these particular parts of the line, all you had to do was drop the track pan and drop the scoop. It'll go into the track pan, scoop up the water. And one of the great things about it, being that this is New York State and it's cold in the winter, the track pans were heated to prevent the water from freezing up.
So an interesting thing about that is, going 60 miles an hour through a track pan, you would think that the tender would blow apart. So I know that one of the cool things that New York Central did was along the bottom where the water pan would be, they would have blow-off valves so that the water wouldn't, literally rip the tender apart.
Right, and that's something that when Kevin talks about the features, that's something that he's going to mention. But one of the things about the PT tenders is the fact that many of the older Hudsons were actually retrofitted with the PT tenders.
Very good, very good. I think that we should start taking a look at the feature sets that's out here now, Jeffrey.
So as Kevin, let's hand this one over to you, and we'll start taking a look at some of the features that Lionel included in the new Visionline Niagara.
Perfect. All right, so here we have two versions of the Niagaras. We have the 6023, which had the dual lights, which I'll show you in a second, and the 6005, which Jeffrey talked about a little earlier. One of the really cool things to start this presentation off is the number of ways you can actually run the Niagaras from Lionel. You can run it traditionally through your orange remote by programming it. So if you have a Lion Chief Plus remote, you can actually run it off the Lion Chief remote. You can run it off of your iPad. So the iPad's not going, but we'll get that up and running and show you the Bluetooth application. You can run it off your cell phone, which I left over by Jeffrey because I didn't want to be interrupted here, but it runs off the same exact application that we'll show you on the iPad. And of course, you can use the Legacy 990 or TMC remote controls. So regardless of what system you have, one of the coolest things about this is the flexibility to meet any modeler's system. Second thing I'd like to talk about in this particular case is the simplicity of downloading the application on your phone or on your iPad. You simply go to lionel.com, up on your the App Store or the Android Store, and download the application, and you're ready to go. So literally it will take 5 or 6 minutes if you're using a mobile device. Now let's talk about the engine itself and the different features, functionalities that it has. We're going to start from the front of the engine because this is some of the coolest things we'll do, and we'll show you a profile and we'll show you the head on it. It has 3 smoke units. We have a smoke unit here on the front for the stack. Underneath the boiler, we have all your key programming elements. Underneath the whistle blow-off package is another smoke unit, which is always hard to get out. It's magnetized, and as soon as I get it out, I'll show it to you what it looks like. Okay, this is what it looks like. So when you have the blow-off smoke, this is where it's going to come out from. You have a magnetized cap, which I will show you if Jeffrey can zoom in on that. And that simply goes on the top. Remember to put it on the right way. There's a magnet on there. All right. And then the final thing is the tender. The tender also has a smoke capability because, as we talked about in the initial discussion, these would go through a water pan on the tracks. And in order to get that same realistic effect of the water coming through and out the sides, Lionel has put a smoke unit right under this cap. Now, I'm not going to take this cap off, but it's magnetized. All right, and the actual third smoke unit is right in here. The way to get the smoke fluid in there, and we use Lionel Premium Smoke Fluid as per the instructions, Lionel includes a little funnel. There's many ways to get it in there, but this is actually the easiest way. The second thing is if you buy the Lionel smoke fluid, because many people can't count to 20, the smoke fluid now, if you purchase it from Lionel, which is the recommended smoke fluid, has milliliter mentions on it. So you can figure out roughly what 20 is by filling it up. Now you don't want to overfill these things because it will take a long time for the smoke to come out, so better to put 20 or less fluids drops in it and you're ready to go. Now, with that said, programming is up on the top. All right, you have your feature functionality here, and I will slowly bring this over to Jeffrey so he can see it. Didn't mean to cross in front of that, but you have your program run switch, and these are the 3 areas where I talked about where you can turn the smoke on and off. All of them are right here and located underneath the boiler. So we're going to put this back on here. All right. This is what we want to do. Okay, what I like in many instances, and I'm a fan of this these days, is the white walls that are on here. I just, for some reason, they kind of, you know, captured my attention, and I really think Lionel did a great job with that. The other thing I'd like to kind of mention here too is that when you have the engine running, is the only time the tender smoke will come out, other than if you set it off through the remote control. A couple of things with that is that this is on a timer. So if it's just sitting there and it's not running, a minute or two into it, the smoke will come out through the top, right? It smokes very, very well. We've had this thing on the track a couple times, and it just continues to smoke fantastic. You have fire in the door, glass windows. I think from the perspective of what's in the Visionline, Lionel threw everything at it they possibly could. You can go into the 2810 catalog, and you can read a laundry list of features and functionalities that are standard within that unit. Second thing I wanted to talk about, or third thing I want to talk about, is the bottom of the tender and the coupler here. This is a very unique coupler. It will detect how many cars you have on the back of the engine, or back of the consist, and it will adjust the throttle and throat sounds of the engine. So if you have a light load, it makes it sound like it's not working very hard. You put a heavy load on the back, and it automatically will create a heavier stress on the engine, and it will actually make that noise. On the back of the locomotive, we have the coupler head. So this is a really kind of simple feature to use.
All right, so Kevin did a fantastic job going over some of the features that come with this Visionline locomotive. I'm going to go over the details of the Niagara, starting from the front and working our way back. In the front of the locomotive, you have a dummy O scale coupler. However, Lionel does give you a dummy O gauge coupler if you want to double head your Niagaras with another Niagara or any other locomotive. But you do have that capability for double head running as well. You just need to replace the scale coupler with the regular O gauge coupler. This particular locomotive, number 6023, has the twin beam headlight, whereas 6005, which is this one right here, as you can see, has a single beam headlight. The Niagaras were delivered with a single beam headlight. However, they were later retrofitted with a more powerful dual beam headlight. So the Century Club 2 version actually has the dual beam headlight. This guy right here, 6023, has the dual beam headlight, but 6005 has the single beam headlight, which was the reason why I purchased it, because I already have the dual beam headlight in the Century Club 2 version, so it's nice to have something a little different. Another difference that people might notice is the difference in the boiler color. Some people may argue that this boiler color on the front is a little too silvery. I don't want to say, I can't disagree, but it's not as bad in person as it might look on the camera. It really isn't too horrible. But as we mentioned here, we have the elephant ears, which were standard deliveries on the Niagara, or smoke lifters as the technical term is called, but we call them elephant ears here on the New York Central. Legible builder's plate from Alco, the nice white wall wheels that Kevin mentioned, darkened side frames, the drive rides, which is a really nice touch on Lionel's part, which makes the locomotive look like the workhorse that it actually is. Moving a little bit further down, you have a horn, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a little bit. The Niagaras both had a whistle, which is here, smoking whistle at that, and you'll see, and a horn. And by toggling the aux 1 switch on your legacy remote, you could switch between using the horn or the whistle. Cab with the engineer and fireman figure. You have a nice little walkway between the engine and the tender. 2 speakers, speaker in the locomotive, speaker in the tender, which is also nice. Moving back to this little walkway, it's a nice touch, although the real Niagaras did not have a fireman that shoveled coal into the firebox, just as the Hudsons and some of the more modern locomotives on New York Central Railroad actually had a corkscrew that fed coal from this massive tender into the firebox. Moving on, you have the little shoot-off valves here for the water scoop, which will only activate when the locomotive is running at a particular speed. Force coupler that Kevin mentioned. The water tender scoop opens up. The water tender hatch opens up and that actually reveals more volume controls for the speaker in the tender. And as Kevin mentioned, the force coupler, which is real cool. When I get this thing firing, in a minute you're going to hear the difference. When the locomotive is running light, meaning by itself, there's no force behind it, it's a very light chuffing sound. However, when you put a train behind it, and I'm going to put my heavyweight cars from Lionel behind it, you're going to hear that there's a big difference, especially going up hills, which leads me back to this drawbar, which is nice and thin. Good, bad. Good because it's nice and thin. Bad because when you are going down a hill and the train is pushing back against the lead of the locomotive, that drawbar drops. And I've had that issue here at the HiRailers where we have a lot of grades. Once that drawbar drops, hits the center rail, you might get a short. The best action to counteract that, just put a small piece of electrical tape on the bottom and you won't have to worry about it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire this thing up. Turn the smoke on high, and within a few minutes you will see the pop-off safety smoke go. But while we wait for that, here's your whistle. And once you hit the aux 1, you got the horn. So you could run it either way. It was both prototypical. Me, I like the whistle. And here's your pop-off steam. And this pop-off steam will stay for about 2 minutes or so, or unless the locomotive starts getting into motion. So let's get this engine running so you can kind of see it pop off.
All right, Jeffrey, I mean, thanks for going through the feature functionality and that history list for the New York Central. I know you're a huge buff.
Sure am.
I really think Lionel hit a home run with this engine. I mean, it has all the feature functionality that a modeler can want. Any particular feature you like best?
I don't know. I mean, definitely the pop-off smoke and the tender smoke is awesome. But you know, for me, just having this locomotive again, it's been probably 20 years since they released it, since the Century Club. So now you're getting a beautiful locomotive with all today's workings, especially being in a legacy engine. You know you're going to get more, and you're going to pay for it, but it's worth every penny.
Yeah, the technology package and the 3 units, the sound, I mean, it's really a step up from the previous Niagara. This does come at a whopping $1,900 for retail, but then again, most of Lionel's Vision lines seem to be running between the $1,500 to $1,900 range,
right,
with the exception of the Big Boy and the Allegheny, which was slightly higher. I think this is well worth the price. I'm sure you can get it a little cheaper from dealers that may have some existing stock. You should know this was build to order, so Lionel probably did not make a whole lot of them in terms of extras to be out there. So if you find one at a dealer, or you may find one on eBay, my suggestion is, and this is just Kevin and probably you, get it,
yes,
because it's a lot of fun to use. And thank you very much for joining us today. Once again, Jeffrey,
yep,
thanks a lot for the history lesson. That's
no
a
problem.
fantastic history lesson. I learned something new every time we talk about the New York Central.
Yep.
Hope you enjoy the video.
All right, take care.